Thank you for a recent purchase from Halo Car Lifts. In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to install our Pro Series. This is model number Hl9K-Pro. It's rated for 9,000 pounds. As before, we're going to unwrap. We're going to walk you through all the parts that come with the lift and demonstrate how to install it. Just like in all of our lifts, the hardware box comes inside. We'll put this to the side for now. This is your locking bracket for the motor. We're going to be mounting the motor on the back left side. So that's opposite side of where you're going to load the car from. This one we'll put to the side as well. This is your motor. Again, we're going to put it on the back left. So we're just going to put this in the back side left of the lift. These are your nylon sliders. These are going to slide in between the wraparound slots of the post. These are your cross beams. As you see, we're going to be sliding these 4 nylon sliders inside. That way they slide up and down on the posts easier. All the lifts are held together by this steel shipping crate. You're going to see a lot of the hardware that comes with it. All the bolts that hold the post, as well as the runways. All of these bolts you don't use. You can either use them for later or you can dispose of them, but they are not required for the install. Before we start sliding the cross beams into the post, we always make sure that the locking slots are facing upwards. That way they correspond with the locking block that's inside the cross beam. So make sure these are facing up on all 4 sides. If you have anything to lift your posts up, it'll make it a little bit easier. We use these rubber blocks. So these are your nylon rollers. These nylon sliders, as you can see, there's a longer side and a shorter side on the L bracket. It is important to notate that the shorter side, when inserting them, the shorter side goes on the inside. That way it doesn't interfere with the locking block. So I'll show it again. Shorter side will face up. For this, it's just going to be on the locking block side. So this shorter side will slide up here, as you can see. But for right now, we're going to use these nylon sliders to hold the locking block disengaged. As you can see right here, this is just going to make it easier for you to slide the crossbeam into the post. We just put it right there. We did the same on the other side. Now you're free to grab the crossbeam and slide it into place on the post. These rubber blocks come in handy for the Pro model, just to give you a little bit of leverage so you can slide your crossbeam in place. We're going to use these nylon blocks to hold the brake and have it be disengaged the entire time we're sliding the crossbeam down. You can just slide this one in there just like that. Make sure you grab the secondary brake, hold it in place, and then we can pull the crossbeam into position. We're going to let it sit on the 8th locking slot, so 7 exposed. Once we have it in position, you can remove the nylon slider and then prop up your post. Again, when sliding these nylon sliders, make sure you have the short side on the inside of the crossbeam. Short side will go in here. All these pieces that you see on top, they're going to be found on the bottom runway. So we can start unboxing and I can walk you through what each of the items are. These corner brackets, you have 8 of them. These go on here. This is to hold your nylon sliders in place. So you're gonna have 1 on each side of the post. Right here, this open slot, this is where you'll slide your screw. So it'll go just like that on all 4 posts. These are your stoppers. These are your stationary ones. These are the ones you mount onto the runways with the bolts, and these won't be removed. These 4 right here are your caps. This is what is going to slide on top of your post and hold your cables in place. These are your second stoppers. These you'll know are the removable ones because they have the slots in place. These are the ones you slide in and out from the loading side of the lift. These, you can see there's a certain shape to it. They'll just match up to the inside of your post. This is where your cable goes and is fed through. So for this one, You see it squares off. This faces the inside. Threading for the brake side. One of the 4 caps for the post have 4 screw holes that are already threaded. Make sure you keep that to the side. This is going to be mounted on the side where you're going to mount the motor to. So for this install, we have the motor being mounted on the back left. So we're going to make sure to put this cap on the back left. This is your mounting bracket for the motor. This is the part that's going to get screwed onto this top cap using these 4 slots right there. This is your mounting bracket. Slide it on each side. Washer, locking nut, and we can just hand tighten it for now. We'll be able to come back at the end and make sure all the bolts are firmly tight. These are your casters. We'll put these to the side for now, and we'll assemble them once we have the runways in position. These are your stationary stoppers. These are going to go on the back side of the lift. So we're going to put these in position from now. Your hydraulic fluid line. This is going to go on the motor side. These are your mounting brackets. These are going to be installed on the front side of your lift where you're going to be loading from. These are where you're going to slide your ramps on once they're assembled. This is a nylon slider. This is going to be mounted on the bottom by the piston. This is just going to help you make it easier for the piston to slide back and forth without interfering with any of the cables. They don't normally do, but it's just a little extra piece that just makes it run a little bit nicer. These, just like as any of the other lifts, this is your brake assembly line. This is the opposite side of where your motor is. We're going to put that here. Your center rod on the side with the handle. These are the connectors. Just put them in position from now. This runway, the top runway, has the piston on it. So as we're assembling, just keep in mind that the lip is going to be facing inside. That way you have it facing the right direction. So we're going to line this up as best as possible to the locking, to the holes, the mounting holes on each side of the crossbeam. Bring this into place. Note the difference. You're going to have longer bolts. One's shorter, one's longer. This side's going to go on the side where you're installing the mounting bracket for your ramps. This is going to go on the side where you have your stationary stoppers that we previously put back there. So these are your back, these are your front for this install. Okay, keep in mind the hardware that we're taking off, not to mix it with the hardware that we just took out of our hardware box. Usually we just like to throw this to the side, that way we don't get them mixed up. As he's lifting the runway, I like to get these bolts prepped, put the washers in. That way it's less moving. Once we get it lifted high enough and I feed the bolt through, you want to do as little lifting as possible, since this runway is about 900 pounds, so it's a bit heavy. So as you can see right here, we're going to try to eyeball it, get it into position as best as possible. You might need to move the post a little bit once the runway's raised. That way you can let it sit back down. So as he's going to drop the runway, I like to just get in this viewpoint and try to guide it right into position this way. Same as the right side. For your mounting side, you're going to have these larger locking nuts. These are going to be placed in between the bolt and your mounting bracket. That way it gives you a little bit of space for you to slide your ramps into place. We'll leave the crates on. We'll use these to flip and give us a little bit of leverage to flip this runway back up. One. Slide it back. These we can hold in place just right as he's releasing the pressure, making it easier for you to put these bolts into place. We're using the larger nuts in between, sliding the bracket in between the brake line, and then our washer, locking nut, locking. We'll just cut these zip ties, release the cables for us to be able to feed them through the ramps. So always let's take these bolts off. That way we can feed them through the runways a little bit easier. This, as you'll see, there's a little slot right in between the runway and the crossbeam. Use that to feed upwards and then pull through. This one you can just manually push the piston out to give you some leverage on the cable so you can feed them through a little bit easier. It might take a little bit of force, but you'll be able to do it manually. So we'll feed these on the opposite side. I'm going to feed this right through the slots on the inside as well. You can hold on the opposite side right here. This is the bolt. Just hold it in place and allow you to release this bolt. Once you get enough of it to release in order for you to feed the cable through, then you can pass it back in and reattach the nut. This will help you to keep the cable in place and it doesn't get disengaged on the pulley. There's a couple features on the Pro model that it's a little bit extra work, but down the line it pays off. That way you have no issues. Here's a second nut. Now we can feed the cable through and on the back side of this pulley. So we feed it through and let it just sit right there. Now we can push this nut all the way back towards the crossbeam. So before we release the bolt, we need to put the second nut in place. Let it tighten it up. And then you can just release both. This just has to be hand tight. Now you have this bolt in place firmly. We can reattach this nut on the front and your cable's in place. Now you can feed the cable, as you can see, through the pulley, through the front side of this secondary locking safety feature, and then you have your nuts on the top. Just like in all of our lifts, you want to make sure that this is equally on enough thread shown equally on all posts. That way there's no difference in slack on the cables. So this, I just like to use my finger as a gauge, and I will go on all 4 posts and make sure they're all about the same threads showing exposed. Just minor adjustments will help you down the line to avoid any issues with your locking blocks not engaging at the same time. There's this bolt that we need to release, taking off the front nut. Give a little bit slack on the primary nut, and then the 2 front nuts released. Make sure to insert. This will hold your pulley cage in place and your cable in place inside the pulley system as well. Now we'll just put the last nut in place. Pull the cable through in front of the secondary locking mechanism. Feed it through and put your locking nuts in place. Here's your brake line. This is going to be fed through these brackets that you see here. So we'll take off the packaging. You'll be able to insert it from either side. Just make sure you remove these nuts that are going to hold your joint in place. We'll remove those in order for us to be able to slide this through these 2 brackets that are welded onto the runway. So this is your handle. It's going to go on the side where you're mounting your motor. This slides through this hole that's made in the crossbeam. It slides through. And now the locking nut that we took off to be able to slide the brake line through, then put back. I like to visually look and create the same distance on these. That way you know once we put our bolt in place, we know that they're equally dispersed in the threads. So for now, I can lock this one back in, close to the nut that we previously put in, just right about there. And then we can just turn this one through as well. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Do the same thing. We'll remove this locking nut and we'll feed it through the hole that's in the crossbeam. Now we can come underneath, try to create enough equally. It's important that we have these placed or tightened equally on both sides. That way you can keep tension when you're trying to disengage the brakes. So we'll have to adjust that, but keep that in mind. So as you can see right there, This is gonna sit right about in that center. Now we can feed it through. A good gauge for you to use when you're installing the brake line is you want this to be right onto the crossbeam, not tight enough of a wiggle room. That way you'll know how much more you need to thread into those locking nuts in the center. Right there, it's as much as it'll give. Now we can bring these locking nuts somewhat close too. There's still a little bit of play, so I just want to undo this bolt and bring this one just a little bit more in. Now there's not much play in this brake line. Now we're ready to attach it. This is the mounting bracket for your motor. This is gonna sit on the top side of the cap. So we're just gonna install it facing with the motor facing on the outside of the post this way. You can also just rotate it. You can put it in either direction. This is the good thing about the Pro model, that it's omnidirectional. So you can mount the motor on whichever side is best suited for you. Now we can mount the motor or the bolts. It's your hydraulic fluid line.
We're gonna mount the hydraulic line. So in the box, there's 2 valves. You'll see them come like this. So one valve with the washer, and then the second valve like that. So this valve is gonna go here, and this valve is gonna go on the motor, depending on where you want it. So this is a stopper. You're gonna have to remove this stopper and replace it to the back side where this blue plug is, or vice versa, depending on how you rotate the motor. And that will go there. This will connect here. So we're gonna take this out, the removable side off. We're gonna use the short side to connect to this valve. You wanna make sure that this is tight or it will leak. So we're gonna grab 2 adjustable wrenches to tighten this up. Be good. Then we're gonna thread it through the secondary hole, put the nut back on to hold it into place. To tighten it, you're gonna have to grab it from the bottom still so it doesn't move, and tighten this nut up. Now we're gonna go and we're gonna grab this hydraulic line. There's gonna be a 90-degree, and there's gonna be a straight edge. The straight edge goes towards the runway. We're gonna tighten that up for now. Again, we're gonna have to grab it from underneath so it doesn't twist. Tighten this up so we have no leaks. Good. Now for this one, we need a 3/4. We're gonna take this nut out. We're gonna leave the washer on it, and we're gonna replace it on that back side. New one comes in with the washer, a gasket. Then we're gonna come over here, take this plug out, and plug it with the existing plug that we had earlier. Then you're gonna connect the 90 degrees to the motor. Make sure not to over tighten it so you don't strip the valve. And then we're gonna fill it up with 10 liters of AW46 hydraulic fluid. Now we're gonna plug it in and test run it.